Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve. And as you may have noticed, the legacy media doesn't appear to be much of a fan of our new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. You might recall MSNBC's Jen Circleback Psaki excoriating Johnson for being, quote, a religious fundamentalist and Christian extremist, while another left wing outlet claimed that Mike Johnson is, quote, the most dangerous Christian nationalist leader in the country. But ironically, with the advent of woke insanity and our elites not knowing what a woman is, more and more people are realizing that it's actually secular liberals who are the real fundamentalist extremists. Joining me to discuss precisely the nature of the media's disdain for Speaker Johnson is pastor, author, and slayer of all things secular, Doug Wilson. Doug, thanks so much for being with us again. It's always an honor to have you here.
Oh, it's wonderful to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, it's my honor. So, I just broadly speaking, I mean, what do you make of the media vilifying Mike Johnson? He seems to be the most humble, wonderful fellow you can imagine. I know one publication, I forget what it was, Vice or Slate or one of them, or just excoriate him for not being rich enough. He was
Yeah.
right. He was actually trying to live off credit cards and balance his budget. But
He's
but there,
clearly not corrupt like the rest of us.
exactly. We can't corrupt them. What are we going to do? But they're claiming he's the new face of Christian nationalism, which it seems to me inadvertently admits that Christian nationalism is gaining ground in the country, does it not?
Uh, Absolutely, and it reveals how the media is going to portray you. If you're the kind of Christian who agrees to keep everything you think about Christ behind your eyeballs and between your ears, and you're never going to let it come out, then they might leave you alone. They probably won't, but they might leave you alone. They might leave you alone. And this is, I think, the big thing is this revelatory here is how it affects the debate between Christians, conservative Christians, some of whom don't want to be called Christian nationalists. No, that's a terrible name. And others who say, yeah, let's lean in and let's just embrace it and say, yes, Christ is Lord. This sort of reveals to those believers that no matter what you say or do, if you're opposed to abortion and if you are opposed in any way to the sexual revolution, then you're a Christian nationalist as far as they're concerned.
That's right.
Right?
Right.
They're gonna stuff you in that cubby hole so fast. Oh, um, and look, we're all going to be in the same cattle car as we're hauled off to the camps. Why don't we just why don't we make friends now?
That's right. Let's stop arguing about semantics. They're defining it over there. They're
Yeah,
defining the terms. You're right.
that's
You're
right.
stuck with it. You're a, I mean, you're a prolific. I wanted to look up. You're a prolific author. Let me just say that. And I want to look up how many books you've actually written. Have you hit 100 yet? Are you a centennial yet?
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
You are. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could. There was one site, I think it was Goodreads, that had about 5 pages of about 20 books each. So that's what I figured you hit about 100.
Yeah.
I've read many of them. I have to catch up. But your latest one is Mere Christendom, which is a wonderful book, and you have to click on the link below to get it. Chapter 1 is a very interesting title. It's titled "The Wickedness of Secularism." Can you flesh that out a little bit? In your view, why is secularism not merely wrong? Why is it ultimately wicked?
Yeah, it's not just a mistake like thinking 2 + 2 = 5.
Right.
What you're saying is that you want to conduct your affairs personally, and you want all of us collectively to conduct our affairs without reference to transcendent truth, goodness, and beauty.
Right.
Right? And
Right.
what you're saying by that is anything goes.
Right.
You know, I have no idea why that awful song by John Lennon, Imagine, um, has the traction it does. Above Buchenwald, only sky.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It sounds so depressing.
it's so depressing. So you have the most vile, evil, wretched things that can ever be done by men to men,
Right.
and There is no ultimate answer to any of it.
Right.
No hell below us,
Right. Above
no
us only sky. Yeah. Yeah.
no justice, no nothing. And what you've done is you've said all the tears shed in human history, all the agony, all the injustice is just froth on the waves.
Wow.
There's nothing there, and
Right.
so and that's why it's wicked. What you're doing is you're backhanding every victim in the history of the world. You,
Wow.
you're saying we don't care. The universe doesn't care. The cosmos doesn't care. There is no God, and if there were, he wouldn't care. Uh,
Right.
that is a wretched system. Now, what you're wanting to do, and the late Francis Schaeffer taught us this: if there is no God above the state, let's say the state's here. If there is no God above the state, then the state is God.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Right.
If there is no absolute above the state is absolute. And
Right.
that lands you in George Orwell territory,
Yeah.
and that's wicked.
That's wicked. Yeah. 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 I've heard it put, classically speaking, human civilization started with the divine. Some, whether it's ancient Greeks, Christians, ancient Chinese, starts with the divine, the sacred, the absolute, the true, the good, and the beautiful in some way, shape, or form. And then there's like some kind of priestly class, pastoral class, or something that interprets that sacred. And then there's a political class that enacts the sacred. And then there's a military class that protects the sacred. And then there's the general class, as it were, that lives it out and embodies it in every sphere of life, in economics and art and literature and music and poetry. And then usually, like, at the very, very end, ironically, there's like the scientists and the technocrats and the people are trying to, fix things and make them work. And what we've done is we've completely inverted that society so that the technocrats are now on top and they're
Yeah.
trying to engineer everything in human life
And
such
they
that
claim
now, yes, please.
and they claim in principle that they answer to no one.
And exactly. And
Right.
there's no way a life of faith, family, and freedom could flourish in such an inverted social order. Again, it reminds me a lot of Genesis 3, so Genesis 1 and 2, God, man, woman, animal, right? And then the great inversion. So the animal's on the top calling the
Right.
shots, and then the woman, then the man, and God is
Right.
completely forsaken. So
Right.
it's an inherently absurd, insane world order that from which we ironically we get this notion we don't even know what a woman is anymore, but they sure know what a Christian nationalist is.
Yeah, that's right. Uh, they there's the old child's joke of what's the difference between a hippopotamus and a mailbox? And I don't know. Well, I'm sure not going to send you to mail any letters. Yeah. Wh- why why are we entrusting our future to people who can't define what a girl is
Right.
and who can't define what a boy is?
Right.
And there's a fundamental issue here. If you can't, if I'd say to our elites, our rulers, the people who currently have control, if you can't define what a human is,
Right.
because you're not a biologist, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
I can't define what a human is because I'm not a biologist. Then how on earth are you going to be able to tell us what human rights are?
Right. Right.
If you don't know what a human is, you don't know what human rights are. And we have a justice on the Supreme Court who doesn't know what a woman is, doesn't know what a man is because she's not a biologist. And that means she doesn't know what men's rights are because she doesn't know what a man is. She doesn't know what women's rights are. She's not a biologist. She doesn't know what human rights are. And we've gotten to the point where things are just absolutely demented,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hence the wickedness of it. It's interesting, even scholars like Joel Kotkin over at Chapman University in California, he's referring to our age as a neo-feudalist period or a re-feudalization that we're going through where a tremendous amount of power and wealth is being accumulated in the hands of very, very few people. I think the stat he cited is 5 years ago, 400 billionaires controlled 50% of the world's assets. Today, it's only 100 billionaires. So you have all this power and wealth amassed in the hands of an aristocratic elite. And at the same time, the way he puts it, and this is what it made me think about when I was reading through Mere Christendom, he says we have a new kind of religious fundamentalism being forced from the top down in the form of wokeness that's
Mhm.
being enforced not by so much by a clerical class today as much as a clerisy class, a class of pseudo intellectuals in the universities, and anyone who dissents or stands up against this woke fundamentalism is declared a heretic. And heretics, by
Yeah,
definition, have to be excommunicated, hence cancel culture. So even
right.
some university scholars are recognizing that today's secularism has all the hallmarks of of a warped sort of religious fundamentalism. Is that
Yes.
your view as well? Is that
Uh,
this is not neutral territory here. This is a very real kind of, again, sort of warped metaphysic.
yeah, this warp spasm of intolerance
Mm,
is fundamentalism without a fundament. You know,
right.
at
Right.
at least the old fundamentalists had a rear end.
Yeah, I love that. That's
Uh,
great. Yeah.
so what they're doing is they are savagely imposing this arbitrary standard of theirs, and not only do they impose it with the rigor of a jihadi fundamentalist, not only do they impose it that way, and they cancel you at the drop of a hat, but like the Stalinist show trials and like the North Vietnamese struggle sessions, they make their designated victim accuse themselves first, right? So you must be made to confess, and that's why apologies have been weaponized. And so what happens, and when someone runs afoul of the authorities and they refuse to apologize, all right, all hell breaks loose, uh, because that's part of the show trial liturgy. You must get the accused person to admit fault, and this was I don't want to get derailed on this, but this was incidentally Donald Trump's superpower, because he wouldn't apologize.
Right.
And
Right.
speaking as a Christian, I thought there were times when he should have.
Sure. Sure.
There,
Yeah, there are
yeah,
plenty. Sure.
but he just wouldn't apologize, and it drove them crazy,
Yeah.
um, because their weapon is to get someone, you unearth some ill-advised tweet from 10 years ago of a current CEO of some successful company, and the first thing that happens is that guy's got to crawl.
Right.
Okay,
Right. Right.
and so the first lesson for Christians is only apologize to anyone if God thinks you owe it to them.
Mhm.
If if God believes you owe an apology, then no one should have to ask. But
Right.
demands for apology are the one of the central weapons of our current tyrants.
Yeah. 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 The weaponization of apologies. I love that. And yet there seems to be a massive blowback. And I'm even looking on the world stage. So I'm thinking of two nations that were always put forward as sort of your models of secularity, international secularity, have been India and Turkey. Sort of this top down imposed secularism from their Western educated or more indoctrinated sort of political class that tried to impose this progressive, enlightened secularism on their respective populations, and now you're seeing a massive blowback there. I mean, India's elected a Hindu nationalist government and two back-to-back landslides. President Erdogan in Turkey has been aligning the nation more with a sort of neo-Ottoman vision of Islam. I don't know if you caught this, Doug, back in 2017. NPR had a very interesting article on it. Turkey actually made teaching evolution illegal in their K to 12 schools. They're required to teach intelligent design, and NPR almost had a stroke over this, having to report on this. But it's all part of of going back, rejecting secularism, going more into a post-secular world. You're obviously on the front lines of this. Are you seeing a rising backlash against the secular fundamentalism, particularly here in the States?
I do. I see many indications of it. Some of them political, but some are in what people are willing to say online and that sort of thing. I see definite signs of restiveness um, on the part of ordinary people, and and I think that this is necessary because if I could borrow a term from the environmentalists, um, stupidity is not sustainable. Right? Um, in the long run, why am I an optimist? Well, in the long run, stupidity doesn't work. You can't you can't have a functioning society that doesn't know what a girl is, that doesn't know what a boy is, that doesn't know what marriage is. You can't tap out and say, well, we're not going to get into that. Um, whatever it is you're selling, it is going to be labeled at some point disintegration. Whatever you're putting in this box is a disintegration box. And if you try to apply it to a culture, then and the culture adopts it long term, that society is going to blow apart, and another functioning society will replace it. Uh, and I don't think that I think there are too many people that still see the world right side up. Tens of millions of them, who say to themselves, "How did this foolishness get out of the Ivy League and into the mainstream?" Right, and the Ivy Leagues and the higher education, those are the lymph nodes, and critical theory, the Frankfurt School, all of that. They know how to get into the lymph nodes, and now it's spread to the body politic, and a lot of people are waking up and saying, I don't think so."
I actually just interviewed George Gilder. I actually think it was thanks to you or
Yeah,
Canon Press that set us up with it. Wonderful. I mean, I was talking about interviewing a legend, as you
yeah,
know. I saw your interview with him, which was wonderful as well. But I liked how because I asked him a similar question. And I said, with them taking over all these cultural institutions, is there any hope? And he just smiled and says, "Well, it's a big country." you know, there's a lot of us out there, and we're
yeah,
spread. You look at the election map after the election. There's a lot of red, a sea of red, all across the
yeah,
country. It's a big
yeah,
country. We're
yeah.
out there. We're doing it
They call it flyover country,
right.
but it takes 4 or 5 hours to fly over.
It,
There's there's a
it,
lot there's a lot there.
it does. It does. Another thing I've mentioned this before, but you taught me and my years at ACCS conferences, it's a refrain that you like to use, which I think is so good. Is if you're going to fight the culture wars, you need to have a culture. You
Right,
can't just fight the culture wars in the abstract of some you know think tank ideology or anything. And what I found so interesting in some of the renewal that we're seeing around the world is we're seeing sort of, particularly, I was thinking of Viktor Orban's Hungary, the prime minister of Hungary, and he's Tucker Carlson has featured him a lot, and he's really helping to lead a bit of a neoclassical architectural boom in Budapest, and a number of the remodeling projects around there. Of course, you've had Russia rebuilding so many of its cathedrals that were leveled during the communist era. All of this suggests a very real aesthetic renaissance that's happening, a return to truth, goodness, and beauty. Can you speak, in your view, how do secular societies so explicitly lose an objective, transcendent vision of beauty, and how can a post secular world help to bring that back?
yeah. You can't in the famous passage in Lewis's Abolition of Man, he said that what we do is we remove the organ and demand the function.
Yeah, yeah,
uh, we castrate and bid the geldings to be fruitful. And then
right.
in another book of his, in Preface to Paradise Lost, he says it's like the scent of the flower denying the flower.
Mm,
Um, you're cutting yourself off from everything that makes sense of what you are.
right,
So without God, there is no truth.
right.
Without God, there is no goodness, and without God, there is no beauty.
Beauty.
And and man created, because man is created in the image of God, like it or not. We're not the end products of so many years of evolutionary groping.
Right.
We are created in the image of God, which means because of the fall and because of our fall into sin, we are broken, but
Right.
we still have a hunger for that lost truth, that
Yes.
lost goodness, and that lost beauty. And then when the rebels, the high atheists, the rebels defiantly say there is no such thing as truth, there's no such thing as goodness, there's no such thing as beauty, at some point, the prisoners are going to revolt. They're going to say, is
Right.
they're going to start to kick, because we need those things as much as we need oxygen, as much as we
Right.
need food.
Right.
Um, and when you look at the modern, one of the great books I read years ago by Rookmacher is Modern Art
And the
and
death of a
Death of
culture. Yeah.
Culture.
Yeah.
Um, Anybody who could see, any movie maker, any script writer should have been able to look at the modern art of the first half of the 20th century and say, "Uh oh, this this society is in a death spiral."
Yeah. Big time.
Right? And it took a while for that corruption that the artists had bought into to get out into politics and culture, the broader culture, and into pop culture. But
Right.
it eventually did.
Yeah, and I love the connection with, frankly, with death. In that sense, the way you put it, because in the Christian tradition, the whole notion of the cross is the tree of life restored. The cross is the tree. Paradise comes back in
Right.
and through Christ, and paradise and all of its beauty and all of
Yes.
its fragrance and all of its life. But if you turn your back on the cross, ultimately all you have is death.
It's a death
Ultimately
wish.
all you have is dying. Yeah, by
Not only
definition.
that, at the last part of Proverbs chapter 8, Lady Wisdom is speaking in that chapter. Lady Wisdom is personified. And she says, "All who hate me love death."
Love death. Yeah.
Right? So if you hate wisdom, and wisdom has to come from God, if you hate um, doctrinal wisdom, if you hate moral wisdom, ethical wisdom, and if you hate aesthetic wisdom, you love death in all of those areas. Which is why communism is responsible for 100 million murders, 100 million murders. This is why the secularists who captured our courts and our upper echelons are responsible for 60 million aborted
Aborted
children.
babies. Yep. Yep.
They love death. That's why
Right.
they've enshrined Obergefell as the law of the land.
Right.
These parodies, these grotesque parodies of marriage that
Right.
are by definition fruitless, right?
Right. Right.
Their
By
definition
definition, exactly. Yeah.
by definition fruitless.
Yeah.
And this is the thing that is I think really important. Why is it that all the legal battles over same-sex mirage, I like to call it, have to do with bakers and wedding photographers and
Mhm.
videographers and
Interesting.
wedding coordinators?
Wow.
Well, it's because those are the glorifying professions.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the the photographer is there to make this look good,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
The cake baker is there to make it a celebratory,
Yes.
wonderful event.
Yes.
And what when you have two dudes getting married, there's nothing lamer, right?
Right.
Um, two lesbians marrying is sadder, but the, it's just lame.
Right.
And so what they need to do is they need to impress or coerce evangelical glorifiers, bringing them in to say, here, make this look good,
Right.
right?
Wow.
Make it, and
Wow.
it's like calling in an evangelical makeup artist and telling her to put makeup on the chimpanzee. Um, and, and the makeup artist should say something. You're asking me to do something that is beyond my competence.
Right.
I
Right.
I can't make that chimp look good.
Yeah.
It's an aesthetic argument,
Square the circle. Yeah. Yeah. It's
right?
just you can't do it. And but it's and it represents to the corrosion of categories, the corrosion of definition, the corrosion of well, exactly what we're seeing in the art and music and poetry. It all just begins to die. It begins to shrivel up and
Right.
decompose right in front of you. It's amazing stuff. I mean, we do, pride really does go before the fall. We live in a world of moral law as well as natural law. So let's
Yeah.
let's let's circle back Saki here ourselves with Mike Johnson's speakership. So obviously, talk of the rise of Christian nationalism is once again front and center. So your latest book, Mere Christendom, devotes over 250 pages to the subject.
Hmm.
What would you say to a conservative Christian out there? Because this is sort of how we started off the conversation. What would you say to a conservative Christian? He believes in the Bible, believes in the Nicene Creed, all the sort of stuff, but nevertheless wants to keep Christianity out of politics and keep the public square neutral when it comes to religion.
Right. I would ask him, so when you want to banish Christianity from the public square, how far do you want it to go?
Hmm.
Right? Do you want Christianity to step across the line, but look at you warningly if you start to misbehave? Or do you want Christianity to go away entirely?
Hmm.
Okay. If you want it to go away entirely, then you want civilizational paganism.
Right.
You want the gladiatorial games. You want children thrown into the lap of Moloch. You want abortion. Basically, you choose for yourselves today whom you will serve.
Right. Right.
It's either life or death, as
Right.
Deuteronomy 30 says.
Right.
And there's the way of life and there's the way of death. There's a culture of life and there's the culture of death. Now, what these well-meaning Christians somehow believe is that I can have cultural neutrality and everybody still behaves. Okay,
Right.
right?
Right.
Everybody sort of behaves on an autopilot thing. But the thing I compare it to is the prodigal son didn't run out of his father's money the first weekend away from home,
Right.
right?
Right.
He could party for a while,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
when the Enlightenment, a lot of this goes back to the Enlightenment, but then
Mhm.
there were stages, and I'm simplifying things. But our secular elites, when they ran away from home and they said, we can govern ourselves without reference to God or Christ, what they were doing is they were taking the father's inheritance and they were running away with it. And 10 years after they ran away with the father's inheritance, the sky was still blue and the
Mhm.
grass was still green. No, there wasn't disaster yet. And everybody at the tavern still liked the prodigal son because he still had money. The girls still thought he was cute because
Right.
he had money. Um, but a time came, as Margaret Thatcher famously said, the problem with socialism is sooner or later you run out of other people's
Other
money.
people's money,
Uh,
yeah.
the prodigal son ran out of money. That's where we are now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there was a time when I was a kid where you could watch Leave It to Beaver and say, oh, things are basically right side up. There's a moral universe. Good is good and bad is bad, and there's a moral lesson at the end of this. Isn't There's another sitcom, Father Knows Best, and
Right.
you've got all
Yeah.
these. Everything's right side up. Well, the great Athanasius famously took his stand contra mundum,
Mhm.
against the world. We're having to take our stand contra nugosum mundum, against clown world. Uh,
Yeah.
we, we have gotten to the point where everything is just demented and crazy. All right, it's
Mhm.
demented and crazy, and it's because we have no moral capital. We ran out of money.
Yeah.
Um, and we have to understand that the reason things were right side up for so long was because of Christendom.
Right.
There was an enormous amount of moral capital
Right.
that was accumulated in Western civilization as a result of our shared confession of
Right.
Christ.
Right.
And what we've done is we have started to spend it like drunken sailors, and then we're astonished when it looks like we might run out.
Right.
What? How could this possibly happen? Now, the the good news is that the prodigal son came to his senses.
Yeah.
That's a possible outcome.
Right.
Are Americans sitting there staring at the pig food, wondering how did we get to this place? it didn't used to be this way 20 years ago.
Right.
What? How did we get here?
Right.
Who led us here? Whose idea was this?
Right.
Um, and that's where I'm seeing the signs of restiveness.
Yeah.
Um, and I just want to cheer it on.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we've depleted our borrowed capital, right? Yeah, we've castrated in our bidding the gelding be fruitful, as C.S. Lewis would put it. Yeah, and it's impossible. I mean, for me, one of the most fascinating developments is even in the area of biblical scholarship, particularly rather liberal biblical scholarship that you'll get like at the Society of Biblical Literature, where what's so fascinating is even they're recognizing how political the Apostle Paul's letters actually are. Right, I'm thinking of N.T. Wright's work and Paul's counter imperial theology, but the point being that. That conservative Christian that wants a neutral public square, even if he were to run to liberal Christianity to help him, he's not going to escape the radically political entailments of the gospel. Even they're recognizing that Paul saw the declaration of Christ's redemptive lordship as having dramatic political ramifications as
Right.
well.
If Jesus is Lord, then Caesar isn't.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
Uh, you between Roe, just lastly, between Roe being overturned, which was amazing, affirmative action being overturned, the return of Christendom in many parts of America and Europe that's happening in this renewal, classical education, all that good stuff. I mean, what's your prognosis on the fight against secularism today and in the future? For example, it does seem the pro life movement's been experiencing some setbacks, like we just saw with Ohio.
Yeah.
But ironically, demographers like Eric Kaufman over at the University of London are arguing that conservative Christians are outbreeding secular liberals like never before, with a possibility of hitting a majority in 2030. That's some of Kaufman's demographic statistics. So, how do you see this playing out?
Yeah, I just compared it in a blog post I wrote to the overturning of Roe was the Battle of Jericho, where Jericho fell down flat, and
Yeah,
The Ohio referendum was the first battle of AI, where
yeah,
um, we we went up and the Israelites were defeated,
yeah.
and Joshua was dismayed, yeah, flat on his face before the Lord, and the Lord appears to him and says, what are you doing there? What are you doing lying there? There's get up.
Get
We've
up.
got
There's
to
more to go.
we've got to we've got to deal with sin in the camp,
Right.
which they did with Achan, and then they returned to the battle of Ai. We knew when Roe went down, it moved it from one national battle to 50
Yeah.
isolated battles,
Right. Right.
and in those 50 isolated battles, we already knew that we didn't have California or Massachusetts or
Right.
Illinois, right?
Right. Right.
The reason Ohio was a gut punch is that we should have been able
Yeah.
to take that, just like the
Absolutely.
Israelites should have been able to take Ai, right?
Right. Right.
So the message is don't be complacent. We're in a long war. Uh, Trust in God, read His Word, worship faithfully with your family. Um, Christopher Dawson, a great historian,
Historian.
once
Yeah.
once said that the Christian church lives in the light of eternity and can afford to be patient.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Right, and that's because we serve a transcendental God.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
our God is not caught up in current events.
Right.
God never has a bad news day.
Right. Right. I, I love your folksy turns of phrases. They are artistic beyond measure. You know, one thing when I think of you, Doug, is uh, when I look back at these guys like Joel Kotkin who talk about this refeudalization that we're facing today, I can't help but reflect on how the original feudalization was shattered by the Protestant Reformation,
Mhm.
which
Yeah,
was in many ways, a kind of populist revolt, a sacred, for lack of better terms, sort of like a sacred populism, as it were.
yeah,
And it
that's
looks like we're seeing a comparable revolt happening right now
I think
being
so.
led in no small part from the chimney in Idaho. So I got to tell you that's what gives me heart. I got to tell you that.
The danger sign will be when I paint myself blue.
That's right. That's right. Hold, hold. Doug, what's the best way our viewers can keep up with your amazing work and also so many of the events that you sponsor and that you're
Yeah.
part of during the year?
So if you go to my basically set it up so that if you go to my blog, which is blog and Mablog, and the address is dougwills.com, we set it up that so that on the front page there's a portal to pretty much everything I'm involved with. New St. Andrews College, Logos School, ACCS, all the different places are on the front page of my blog.
Awesome. DougWils.com. Blog and mag blog. Absolutely. It's a must read, gang. You're gonna love it. It's just chock full of stuff. And yes, you're again, you'll see where the prolific writing comes from. It's a blog virtually every day, a few entries every
It's
day.
it comes from the voices in my head. I tell people I tell people I write to make the voices in my head go away, and it's not working.
It's not working. Make him go away. Make him go away. That's right. It's like, well, I'm glad they keep coming. Gang, make sure you click on the link below. Also, get Mere Christendom. It is an amazing read. Get a bunch of copies. Make your Christmas shopping early here.
What a
And
good
make sure,
idea.
yeah, that's right. And it is. It's wonderful. And it's going to be an amazing conversation piece as well in the coming months ahead, especially with the rise of Christian nationalism, not just here, but throughout Europe as well. Make sure to subscribe to Doug's social media, his website. There's always new events happening throughout the country that Doug's on the front lines with, and you'll definitely want to participate in those as well. Doug, once again, thank you so much for giving us some of your time. It's
Oh,
always such an honor to have you here.
well, it's happy to do it. God bless your work.
God bless you too, my friend. Thank you.